Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna demonstrate how I draw glossy lips with colored pencil. Let's start the video. Before I started, I made myself some sort of a color chart. I chose all the reddish colors I have in my collection to be able to compare those to my reference picture. Not all the colors were a match to my reference picture, so I had to mix some of those reddish colors to achieve the right vibrancy. And those are the colors I chose in the end, plus some black and white and also some French gray 10% for blending the teeth. After I lightened up my sketch marks, I started with a light layer of color blocking. The first color blocking I always do very light-handed, so I will be able to add a lot of layers to my drawing. I only made an exception for the black shadow colors right here, because I knew I'm not going to add a lot of colors to this because it's very black and we don't need any other color there shining through. Beginning in the early childhood, we always have learned that the teeth are white, when in fact this is actually not the case at all. I used clay rose, henna and a rosy beige for the teeth, and I blended it all together with a French gray 10%, and only for the highlights I used my white colored pencil, and that still didn't end up very white because I was mixing it all together with the previous colors I have used. If you compare the colors of the teeth to the area I haven't touched so far, you can see how dark this is actually going to be. For the moment it might look way too dark, but you can see in the process of this drawing, when I add all the surrounding areas, it will make more sense in the context and our brain will read it as white. In the beginning of this drawing, I was somewhat overwhelmed by all those abstract shapes and all the color shifting, so I decided to move on with a less complex area to get a better feel for the right colors and for this drawing overall. I left the highlighted areas on this glossy lips blank for the moment to make sure I'll be consistent with my color choice. Sometimes I will just forget which color I've used for the shadows and for the highlights and for the midtones, because I was concentrating on a different part of my drawing, and that will interrupt my workflow and slow down the process a lot. I'm using darker red tones, almost brownish tones, to lay down the first shadow layers and leave out the highlights, and when I'm done with that I will go over with my reddish midtone to blend it all together. Since the highlights are also not white at all, I will lay down a midtone first and then brighten it up with my white colored pencil. Also, if the highlight stands out too much after using my white colored pencil, I will then again go ahead and use my midtones to decrease the brightness of the highlights and then adjusting the color according to my reference picture. I've been showing you the colored pencil choice I made in the beginning, but for the main part for this drawing I used magenta processed red and carmine red, which made, I would say, about 80% of this whole drawing. As a matter of the fact, I used about 2.5 pencils of the magenta shade, and at some point I was afraid I would run out of this color, but fortunately I found some in my stash so I could finish this drawing. Before I started to move on to the right side of the drawing, I added some colors to the highlights of the glossy lips, and those were hot pink and lavender, and a little bit of white to blend it all together. To achieve a realistic look, I also paid very close attention to my reference picture because I didn't want to leave those highlights just white, because this will end up looking very unnatural. If you would like to see more of my videos, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'll be uploading new videos every Tuesday and every Friday. Also, if you have any questions or ideas for future videos, please leave those in the comment section. To establish a three-dimensional look, I created a soft transition between the black shadow area in her mouth against her lips by softly drawing over the line and blending it together with some brown and darker red tones by using circular motions. Since I'm working with Prismacolor colored pencil, which are wax-based, those pigments come off quite easily, so I don't have to put much pressure on when it comes to blending. This allows me to put more layers on top of the color, even though I already have been burnishing, which is basically blending, so I'm still able to make some color corrections. Only when I'm 100% sure that I'm not going to add any more layers to a certain area, I will put on somewhat more pressure to really get into the paper and cover all the white grains that are still shining through. I'm working on Strathmore 500 Bristol vellum surface paper, which is actually quite textured, so the chance of white grain shining through is very high. But I was able to take advantage of that when it came to the raspberry, because it looked like the raspberry was frozen. There were some icy crystal visible, so I just let the white grain shine through, so I would have the illusion of those white crystals showing in my drawing. Initially, I've planned to use my white gel pen to add in all the highlights, but unfortunately they were all dried up, so I wasn't able to use them. So I grabbed my X-Acto knife to add in all the highlights. I'm using my X-Acto knife very carefully because it can permanently damage your paper and totally destroy your drawing. So I'm just slightly lifting up the colors while trying to avoid any scratching of the paper. After I was done with that, I then again went over with my white colored pencil so I could achieve an even brighter highlight. Since I chose a reference picture where the person is wearing very heavy lipstick, I didn't have to worry about drawing the skin surrounding the mouth. If I would draw someone who has more natural lips, meaning without any makeup or lipstick on, I would definitely consider to draw the skin surrounding the mouth, because I would like to make a soft transition between her lips and her skin. But since this person is wearing very heavy lipstick, I was able to get away without drawing any skin and using a very harsh outline. After 16 hours of drawing and adding those last little tweaks, I decided I was done with the drawing, and I think it turned out quite nice actually. So that's it from me. I hope you liked the video, and I also hope to see you in my next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.